Breaking overnight, tariffs on China could jump as high as 245%. A White House fact sheet on Wednesday says the new hike is in response to China's retaliatory tariff of 125%.
It is a very uncertain period of time, so a lot of businesses are having difficulty planning around that changing landscape.
So China is actually a bigger financial power than it looks like on the surface.
I'm not going to say, I'm going to play hardball with China. I'm going to play hardball with you, President Xi. No. We're going to be very nice.
Not everything happened simultaneously, but when you couldn't escape it. Daily life in the United States had abruptly changed by the spring of 2025. It was no longer a slow build, no longer just a political issue, and no longer something anyone could ignore. It had become uninhabitable. Gas, food, and housing, once basic necessities, had become unaffordable luxuries for millions. Beneath the headlines and beyond the political finger-pointing, one factor kept emerging from the chaos: tariffs. Trade policies, crafted in Washington and cloaked in patriotic rhetoric, had created a full-blown affordability crisis. And while lawmakers debated abstract ideas, ordinary Americans watched their lives fall apart. It began with fuels. In early 2025, the U.S. government imposed a 25% tariff on all imports from Mexico, doubled tariffs on goods from China, and added a 10% tax on Canadian energy. The goal was clear: to force both allies and adversaries to make new trade deals while asserting America's energy independence. But in the Northeast, where Canadian refined fuel plays a major role in the supply chain, the impact was immediate. Prices at the pump skyrocketed within days. Wholesale fuel costs skyrocketed, retail prices quickly followed, and drivers across the region suddenly found themselves paying 30 to 40 cents more per gallon. Truckers were hit hard, commuters even harder. By early April, the national average for gasoline had climbed to $3.28, the highest level of the year. Diesel prices also spiked, driving up costs for freight, agriculture, and public transportation. From Boston to Philadelphia, city bus systems began quietly raising fares. Food delivery companies added new fuel surcharges. Uber, Lyft, Amazon, they all passed the rising costs directly to consumers. And for millions of Americans, driving became the only option. Fuel, once a daily necessity, had become a tax on existence. But that was just the beginning. The next tax was on food. As part of the same aggressive trade strategy, the White House slapped 25% tariffs on nearly all agricultural imports from both Mexico and Canada. Before we dive in, do us a solid, hit that like and subscribe button. It keeps Globelines going strong and helps us connect with more informed viewers like you. With that out of the way, let's move on to our next part. It may have sounded like a deliberate, strategic move to the average voter. But for the grocery stores that feed America, it was a financial gut punch. The U.S. imports more than 38% of its fruits and vegetables, and within a week of the new tariffs, prices for items like bananas, strawberries, peppers, and limes jumped 20 to 30%. Retailers sounded the alarm. Major chains like Target and Kroger warned of sweeping price increases across the produce aisle. And they were right. In low-income neighborhoods, fresh fruits and vegetables virtually disappeared. Eggs climbed back to $5 a carton. Bacon prices skyrocketed. Even cheese became something families had to budget for. But the impact wasn't limited to grocery bills. It hit farms too. American farmers, already burdened by rising fertilizer costs, were blindsided when Canada hit back with tariffs of its own. They retaliated by targeting key U.S. exports such as pork, soybeans, wheat, and corn. At the same time, the U.S. slapped a tariff on Canadian potash, the main ingredient in fertilizer. And with 90% of the U.S. potash supply coming from imports, the consequences were swift. Within 60 days, fertilizer prices jumped 15%. Even after the administration reduced the tariff from 25% to 10%, the damage was done. Fertilizer bills skyrocketed, and the cost of farm equipment soon followed. One Iowa farmer put it bluntly, "We spend more to grow food that no one can afford and no one buys. And they call that sovereignty." But it wasn't just farms that were at stake. It was livelihoods. It was the future. The American Farm Bureau issued a stark warning. Without a tariff rollback, small farms wouldn't survive. And they weren't wrong. By April, dozens of small farms across the Midwest had filed for bankruptcy. Grain elevators shut down. Ranchers thinned their herds early to stay afloat. In Montana, outraged farmers staged a tractor blockade of the State House. In Iowa, corn growers held a silent protest, planting mock tombstones in their fields, each engraved with the name of a farm lost since January. One stood out. It read, "Died in retaliation." But while fuel and food captured national attention, another crisis was quietly gaining momentum: housing. In 2025, the U.S. Department of Commerce doubled tariffs on Canadian lumber, raising the total tariff to more than 34%. This single decision added more than $11,000 to the cost of building a typical single-family home in America. The impact was immediate. Builders were blindsided. Construction projects stopped overnight. Affordable housing plans were scrapped. Contractors began laying off workers. Developers who once promised 100 homes now struggled to deliver 30. With fewer homes on the market, rental prices skyrocketed across the country. Through April, average rents across the U.S. were up more than 3% year over year. But in cities like Austin, Phoenix, and Tampa, the increases were much steeper. Landlords, faced with higher costs for repairs, labor, and appliances due to new tariffs, shifted the burden to tenants. In the Bronx, the average one-bedroom topped $2,000. In Los Angeles, renters were hit with sudden $600 increases. For working-class families already stretched thin by rising food and fuel prices, this was the tipping point. What had been a housing crisis now became a full-blown disaster. Even Wall Street began to pay attention. In early May, the Dow fell as earnings reports from major consumer brands reflected shrinking spending, rising costs, and uncertain outlooks. Several retailers warned that mounting economic pressures were forcing shoppers to cut back not by choice, but by necessity. At this point, it wasn't just about politics. It was about daily survival. In San Diego, a tearful woman addressed a city council meeting and said, "I don't need another speech about America's resilience. I need rent that doesn't take 70% of my income." Her plea went viral, but the policies remained unchanged and the nation continued to unravel. Analysts now warn that 2025 could mark the steepest rise in cost-burdened households in U.S. history. Inflation, no longer fueled by pandemic disruption or government stimulus, is now being driven by politics itself. The very trade strategies once aimed at foreign competitors are now hitting American families the hardest. And if left unchecked, they could shape the reality of a generation. Because this isn't just a tough year. It's a redefinition of what it means to afford to live in America. And for millions, that price has become unaffordable. What do you think about the economic fallout from these sweeping trade policies? Were the tariffs a necessary stand for sovereignty or a self-inflicted wound on working Americans? Can the U.S. reverse course before more damage is done? Or has the foundation of daily life already shifted beyond repair? Share your thoughts in the comments below. How do you see this unfolding in the months ahead? If you found this video insightful, don't forget to like and subscribe to Globe Lines, and check out the other videos on your screen for more in-depth stories shaping our world.